All right. Well, let's get started. Welcome. My name is Wendy Venverlo. I'm the Executive Director of NAPSA. As always, it is such a pleasure to be with you today and to bring you hopefully really relevant, exciting content. The presentation that we have today is one that we had at our conference that it took place in Atlanta in September, a really popular session and one that had a lot of really positive feedback. And so I'm excited that you're going to be able to see it today and hear from our presenters. I have just a couple of housekeeping pieces and kind of some reminders. At the end of this session, I'm going to take just a minute or two to talk about our new website. The new website officially launched on Monday, and I'm excited about some of the new content that is on there, including our prior webinars and then a calendar of events where you can find our trainings as well as partner trainings. So I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes at the end kind of walking through where those resources are since they are brand new, and hopefully you're going to find them useful. And with that said, we do have two more webinars that are scheduled and are on our website right now. I haven't yet released them via email, but they will be coming out soon. But just if you want to mark your calendar, and you can also look at our website, on January 21st, we'll be hosting a webinar with HARP talking about reentry for the people within pretrial systems as well as community corrections in general, and how we can help facilitate folks who are coming out of incarceration or coming out of jail restore their health benefits, their health care benefits. That is January 21st. And then February 4th, we will be having the coach referee model for pretrial supervision. So talking about being a coach and using coaching skills rather than just refereeing skills. And that's something from Justice System Partners has put that model forth. And Dr. Brian Levins and Hillary Hartoin from Cass County, Indiana will be there and presenting that on February 4th. So anyway, a couple of webinars to look forward to. Again, I will come back on at the end and talk just a little bit about our website. But I'm so excited to turn things over to our colleagues from the City and County of Denver and have them talk about their implementing time-limited supervision. And so I will turn things over to our NAPSA Southwest Director, Lindsay Dixon.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the country you are. In my region, we also have Guam, so I don't know what time it is there. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Lindsay Dixon. I am on the NAPSA board, as Wendy just mentioned. I also work as a pretrial services manager in Denver County. And I just want to thank NAPSA and Wendy for inviting us to present this again. We did present at the conference in Atlanta. We were there on the last day, and we were very thrilled to have a pretty large number of people attend and lots of participation, lots of great questions and engagement. So we're hoping to, although this is virtually, have some of that similar engagement with you all today. We have the question and answer open as well as the chat, and we'll try to get to as much of that as we can. Please feel free to do that throughout the presentation. We're happy to stop and answer questions as they come up throughout the presentation, and definitely willing to engage afterwards. So I will hand it off to my colleague to introduce herself and begin our presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Aubrey Cote, and I am also a manager with Pretrial Services here in Denver. We're going to start the presentation today with just some context to give you so you're a little bit familiar with Denver and kind of how our program runs before we kind of dive into the time-limited supervision piece. So Denver is obviously a city and a county. We have a population of about 730,000, but because we are a city, that metro area is about 3 million. We have about 31,000 case filings each year. And because we are a city and county, those filings can be state level misdemeanors and felonies. But we also have ordinance violations, which are at the city level. Generally, those are nuisance type crimes. However, in Denver, we also have our ordinance that allows for domestic violence as part of an ordinance violation. So Lindsay's going to talk a little bit more about how that interacts with our program and specifically with time-limited supervision. Our jail population is around 1,700. That's just a little under capacity, depending on how you define capacity, but about 1,700 daily in your jail. So our pretrial services program is part of the Department of Safety. We're under the umbrella of community corrections. In Colorado, pretrial is not a statewide system. So each county administers their pretrial programs locally. And Denver has done that since the 1970s. So we've had a program for a very long time. It looked very different, obviously, in the 1970s. We've done a lot of work and a lot of reform, specifically over the last 15 years. Our program is independent from the courts. It's also independent from the sheriff's department, which I think has benefited us in that reform, that we kind of sit in our own independent pocket. We have kind of the two traditional components that you see in pretrial. We have our investigation and release team. They operate 24/7. We do have advisement court in Denver in person 7 days a week. So because of that, they are doing bond advisement reports every day. They meet with defendants as they are leaving custody if they've been ordered to pretrial supervision, so that defendants are clear on what the expectations are as they're leaving custody. And then they also help us with our alerts. So we do electronic monitoring in Denver, and we do active monitoring. So that requires us to have that 24/7 component. Our supervision team takes over with those defendants when supervision is ordered. They generally daily are supervising around 2,300 defendants. Two main levels of supervision. About 70 to 75% of our population are on what we call enhanced supervision. So that is what you would consider traditional pretrial case management. So connection to support services, court reminder calls, really tailored to the specific needs of that particular defendant. We also have what we call intensive with monitoring, and that is generally GPS monitoring. So that is always going to involve GPS. Generally, that's about 20% of our population. And those are defendants who have an active protected party, a lot of domestic violence that we see with that supervision level. For our bond advisement, we do use assessment. Our CPAT-R, which is our Colorado tool, it was revised in the last couple of years. So it's kind of what we call our new and improved assessment. But it is a traditional pretrial assessment, giving us one score related to public safety and appearance rates. We also use the ODARA. The ODARA is a domestic violence tool. We use that on any of our cases that come through with a domestic violence category. And that just helps our courts to look more closely at the risk of that defendant committing another domestic violence offense. I think we can get the next one. I'll pass it over to Lindsay to move on through the history.
Thank you so much. So just want to talk about how we ended up getting to our what we call our time-limited supervision program. So basically, the way our program works is our officers, our pretrial supervision officers, they file directly with our courts. When we are reporting compliance information, whether that's we're reporting violations to the court or we're reporting that somebody's been fully compliant and is doing well, we file those reports directly with the court. The officer types those up and they file them directly with the court. They file them directly with prosecution and defense, so everybody has copies of those reports. And then anything that we do file, we are required to appear in court on to make sure that those reports get addressed and that we're available to answer any questions on those. So that is kind of a time-consuming process. And as our caseloads began to kind of increase, what we were seeing is that most of the time the officers were spending was on non-compliance. So as we had cases that defendants were fully compliant and they were doing well, they just kind of stayed on supervision forever and ever and ever, as long as their cases were going, because officers were spending most of their time dealing with those technical violations or other non-compliance, new crimes, what have you. And we're not spending time kind of reporting to courts non-compliance, looking at reducing conditions, removing conditions of supervision, and things like that. The other thing that happened is that we saw quite a large increase in our GPS population. So we saw in 2017 over an 80% increase in GPS supervision over 18 months. So you can see in the chart on this slide, quite a significant increase in GPS. And it just was not sustainable for us resource-wise to manage those GPS numbers. We are quite an overutilizer of GPS monitoring in Denver, and it was just getting kind of unmanageable. So we approached our stakeholders with a proposal, which was our first iteration of time-limited supervision. We basically were trying to reduce our GPS numbers and offered a reduction to regular supervision after a period of compliance on GPS. It was a proposal to our courts, prosecution and defense, but it really was that we need to do something here. We can't maintain these numbers, and we think this is a good way to balance community safety, to look at compliance of a defendant and an individual and see that they're doing well, so we can agree as a system to reduce them down to a lower level of supervision after they demonstrate that behavior. Then 2020 happened, and we saw, as the rest of you probably did, a very sharp increase in supervised populations as people were released from custody. So as we were starting that kind of GPS reduction in caseloads, we also started a entire supervised population. We looked at everybody and said, can we start doing reductions across the board to reduce some of that over supervision to kind of reward compliant behavior? And so we looked also at our enhanced population, which is the majority of our supervised population. It's that basic case management, as well as the people that were being ordered to monitored sobriety. So we added those components. So as it stands right now, this is our criteria. It's pretty broad. We recommend time-limited supervision on almost everybody, unless there's a significant public safety concern, or we have somebody that's already under supervision. Definitely if they're under pretrial supervision, but sometimes we consider if they're under any other community supervision. And then those obvious public safety risk cases. Additionally, if somebody is arrested on a new crime and is already under supervision, especially with us at kind of a lower level, so if maybe they're on our enhanced level of supervision and they're arrested on a new crime, we might still recommend like a time limit on GPS. So we say, okay, they haven't been on GPS yet. Let's see if they can demonstrate compliance for a period of time and then reduce down after that, versus just doing blanket supervision without the opportunity to reduce after compliance. So here's a slide that kind of talks a little bit more about what the current timelines and the current practice looks like. So we recommend this as part of our bond advisement report. So we provide that to the court and the parties prior to the first appearance hearing, and the court then orders the time limit supervision as part of that initial bond order. So here's what our orders look like, obviously with the caveat of somebody being fully compliant. 60 days of the intensive GPS supervision, which is then reduced down to enhanced after 60 days of compliance. That GPS comes all the way off and they continue on supervision with us. There's no time frame there. They just stay on supervision with us on that enhanced level. The next one is 90 days of enhanced supervision. So that again is the majority of our supervision, which is that basic case management. They're given 90 days. If they're demonstrating compliance after 90 days, then that supervision completely falls off after that 90-day period. They're totally done with us. There's no more pretrial involvement unless the court reorders supervision. And then the last is the 60 days of monitored sobriety. We don't see this come up as much, but a court can order 60 days of monitored sobriety. And again, if that monitored sobriety is complied with, that falls off after 60 days of compliance. So what we saw last year in 2024 was that the time limited supervision was ordered in 71% of our enhanced and intensive cases. So you can see here with the chart, it's a good chunk of our cases. We either have no supervision being ordered, but the rest of our cases, we have the time limited supervision being ordered in a good chunk of those, which has really, really helped with our numbers. Now, what is compliance, or what do we define compliance as in Denver? There's some really obvious disqualifiers if they fail to appear or if they get a new crime. So excluding a traffic offense or a minor low-level charge, something that generally doesn't come with a jail punishment, then we are not going to remove them. So if they FTA and they don't resolve that FTA within the same day, then they're automatically disqualified. They will continue past that 60 or 90 days. Some technical violations as it relates to GPS or monitored sobriety. So if they're violating their exclusion zones, if they're letting their battery die, if they're submitting positive or missed tests, we have some internal procedures, and basically they kind of get a one chance, and then if they continue to violate, then that's kind of, you're done and you're going to continue on supervision. And then from full removal of supervision, so if they're on that 90-day order, if they have an active warrant, we don't want to remove them off supervision with an active warrant. We want to keep them on so that we can assist them in getting that warrant cleared. And then once they've cleared that, then we'll go back to the court and ask if they can be taken off. I'm seeing a bunch of questions in the Q&A. So I'm just going to pause really quick and read a couple of those. First one is, can you speak to how you got stakeholder, especially judges and prosecutors, to agree to this approach to time-limited supervision? Couple different responses to that, and I'll also let Aubrey feel free to jump in. I can't see you because of the slides. So the first thing I'll say to this is I kind of alluded to this before. It was kind of a request, but it was really more of a tell. Like, we needed to do something. We did not have the resources to manage the numbers that we had. So we kind of came together and said, this is what we think is the best option. A couple slides later, I'm going to talk about some of the things that we agreed to kind of make this a little bit more palatable. But one of the really nice things about Denver is that we have a great stakeholder group who's really supportive generally of pretrial and of what we do. And they were generally kind of understanding and on the same page as us, and kind of got where we were coming from and agreed that our resources should be spent on the people that we believe present the biggest risk to the community here in Denver. Aubrey, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would certainly, all of that is correct. Truly the meeting that we initially had was with the prosecutors, and the chart that we showed that increasing GPS, that is truly the chart that we walked into the room with. And that's why we started with the GPS, because really what the conversation was is around the use of GPS. And if your concerns are public safety driven, and if we have too many cases on GPS, then we can't basically monitor those cases the way that any of us wanted them to be monitored. So I do think it certainly was a lot of conversation, and Lindsay will talk about kind of some of the other things we did to make it more palatable, but it really was around, if you give us too many, we can't do this well. And we want to do this well, and we think there are people that don't need it, and we really had to collaborate on what that might look like. This was a nice way to do it because it took our assessment information, the criminal history, that initial bond advisement hearing, and that initial decision that was made, and added to it the actual behavior of the defendant. So you have all this kind of predictive information. Then you released the defendant, and that defendant got to basically show whether they still needed that supervision. So it was a lot of conversation, but I think those were some of the key points that we hit with those stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you. And the other thing I will add, I think that most of you on this webinar would agree, I don't think there's a single pretrial officer that would say, I can do a great job managing a 350 person caseload, or I can do an awesome job with 120 GPS cases, that I'm definitely going to catch when somebody's doing something nefarious on supervision if I'm managing those numbers. So that's generally something that we're able to get by on here for sure. Okay, the next question we have, are you stopping supervision after a compliance without a new order setting conditions of release? I think with that saying, are we stopping supervision after compliance? Yes. So I will talk more about this, but yes, that's one of the benefits of this. We can just stop the supervision. We don't have to go back to court, but I will go in more detail about this. How often does somebody report when they're on enhanced supervision? That really varies based off of the time that they're at post release and how compliant they are, what some of their barriers or needs might be. Anywhere from 1 to 4 times a month, I would say is the most common. Is this something that is in state statute or the court's accepting of this and order what is recommended? So in Denver, we have a joint administrative order that kind of governs what we're able to do for pretrial. This is part of that order. And I don't know if we're sharing materials or how that works, but certainly our information's at the end. You can reach out to myself and Aubrey, and we're happy to share with you what that looks like.
Lindsay,
And then,
oh, I'm sorry to
sorry,
interrupt, but
somebody's,
I know you
go ahead,
can't see me, Lindsay, sorry.
go ahead.
I think I've looked through most of the questions and I think some of them we're gonna hit through
Okay,
the presentation, so maybe we keep moving and then go back.
great. Sounds good. We'll keep moving since Aubrey screened those, and hopefully we'll get to most of your questions or we'll get to them at the end. All right, so back to what is and what isn't compliance. I've covered what disqualifies somebody from removal. Not a disqualification, missed pretrial meeting. So we have kind of gone back and forth on this, but where we landed was if somebody isn't coming to see their officer, but they are going to court and they are not picking up new charges, we believe that they probably do not need the assistance of pretrial to complete those two requirements of pretrial. You know, those are our two outcomes. And so we are okay with removing them from supervision. That's for the enhanced only. If they're on a GPS monitor, we really do want that hands-on contact. We wouldn't remove them if they were not coming in. I'm clicking, but it is not going. Oh, too far. Okay. So this is some of what we were just talking about. When we were having conversations, especially with the prosecution, a lot of what came up was around cases with victims. So while it's not a statutory requirement, we felt it was important that victims received notification of upcoming changes to the supervision, especially when it came to the GPS monitoring and somebody having that removed. So basically, the initial order happens. The individual gets ordered to 60 days with GPS. That clock starts ticking. There's no requirement to return to court. There's no requirement to notify the victim it's coming off. But everyone felt better if there was an opportunity to at least notify the victim, give them a voice if they wanted to give any input, and give the prosecution opportunity to file any objections. So 2 weeks prior to the date of removal, the court, prosecution, and defense all received notice of that removal happening. It gets filed into the court record, and all the parties are notified. So if anybody wants to file an objection to that, they can go ahead and do that, and that stops the clock immediately. We will not take anybody off of supervision until that court hearing is held or until that motion is ruled on. So that does give prosecution an opportunity to file. What I will say is what we have heard from our bench and from the court is they will ask the prosecution, once they file a motion like that, what is different from when these original conditions of bond were set that makes it so that they should continue. They did their 60 days. They were fully compliant according to pretrial. What can you demonstrate that's changed circumstance-wise from when this was initially ordered that says that we should make a change to this order if they fulfilled their portion of that compliance for 60 days. So the benefits of this. So alluded to this already. This is part of the original court order. We do not have to go back to court. There's no additional hearing. We don't have to file a separate report, distribute that. The notice is a very much like it's very less involved for an officer to do. It's already kind of pre-populated. They're just putting in like the date and it gets sent out and they don't have to go to court. So it's much less time consuming. It's already kind of in there. There's a process in place to continue supervision if anybody believes it's necessary. It does motivate participant compliance. You can talk with them in the case management meetings about, hey, so you've been doing really well. This is what is going to happen if you continue on like this. You know, your supervision is going to drop or you're going to be removed. And then it does reduce overt supervision. So, Aubrey, have you seen any questions related to these slides, or do you want to go ahead and move on with the next ones?
I think we can move on to data because we've got some data questions in here.
Perfect. All right. I will turn the presentation back over to Aubrey.
So one of the drivers of this was obviously around population. So generally one of the first questions we had was, is this impacting our population? Is it doing what we were hoping it would do to really reduce that overall daily supervision? So this is a picture, a graph or a chart that shows you what our population has looked like since 2017. What you can see kind of historically, we have been around 25 to 2,700 daily supervised defendants. We've got the COVID peak in there, which is the area we can kind of just ignore. I don't think that any of us want to pull numbers for any significance from that since it was such an unusual time. But after the COVID peak in that gray area, what you can see is that that's really when time-limited supervision became kind of part of the normal process in Denver. That's when we had not only the 60 days of GPS, but also the 90 days of enhanced. And you do see a drop in the population that's pretty significant that we do believe is correlated to that time-limited supervision. That you can see over the last couple of years, we've had an increase since then in our population, and we believe that's related to some different case filings that we're getting supervision on and not necessarily a result of time-limited supervision. So the next slide that we'll look at was kind of one of the other questions we had was after a year of time-limited or looking at a year of time-limited supervision, in 2024 was what's happening to those defendants that are getting time-limited supervision. So at the 60-day mark for all of the defendants on time-limited supervision in 2024, what we found was that 59% of them had successfully moved to enhance. So they were on GPS, they did their 60 days, they were compliant with those 60 days, and they moved to enhanced supervision. And then an additional 27% of those had dispositioned their case. So really what you're looking at is, just under 80% of those defendants were either done with their case or had moved from GPS to the lower level of enhanced supervision. 6% had committed a new crime, 6 had FTA'd. You have 2% that had their bond modified due to other violations. Those are usually technical violations that ultimately the court revoked and set a new bond in those cases. We did the same thing in looking at the 90-day enhanced. So at the 90-day mark, again, for the 2024 population, what we found, 47% of that group had been completely removed from supervision. So this was, I thought, a great number. That's 47% of a population that would have likely stayed on supervision without this process. 22% had dispositioned their case. So again, the majority of those cases were either being removed from supervision, either through compliance while they were on supervision or because they dispositioned their case. 4% committed a new crime, 27% had FTA. This next chart that I'm showing you, I think was probably the largest question we had. When we started taking defendants off of GPS that had protected parties, the first question that came to most of our stakeholders as well as our team was, what happens at the end of that 60 days? If we take that GPS off, are we going to see that those defendants are being arrested for new crimes because the GPS has been removed? So what you're looking at on this chart is the blue line is your time limited supervision. The red line is regular supervision, so not time limited. And this is looking at when there is a new crime, what day of supervision that new crime occurs. So you can see the dashed vertical line is showing you the 60-day mark. So what this chart is showing us is that where we see new crime is certainly in the beginning of supervision. And what we don't see is for those defendants who were removed from GPS at the 60-day mark, we did not see an increase in arrests for new crime. So this really was very important to us and our stakeholders. We have a lot more work to do around data related to this. But these are some of the primary measures that we were able to pull to make sure that things were going in a direction that both our agency as well as our stakeholders were comfortable with. So what's next? As I alluded to, definitely we have a lot more questions. I think one of the largest questions we have now from a data perspective is, what is happening to those defendants who are removed from enhanced supervision? So they do 90 days of enhanced supervision and then it's completely removed. Because of that, we lose kind of our easy way to know what their outcomes are because they're no longer under our supervision. So we're working to get the data about what is happening with those defendants from the time we remove them to disposition in the cases. And there's a lot of other questions we have. How many days is the right number of days? One of the questions I know in the chat was kind of, where did those numbers come from? Where did the 60 days come from? Where did the 90 days come from? Those were not coming from data necessarily. They were really about, supervising cases for many years and making sure that we thought there was enough time for that kind of behavior component for us to really see, is this person generally going to be compliant? So certainly I think we have a lot more data now to look at those numbers and say, is there a different number of days that we may want to target for these groups? And then Lindsay, I'll let you talk about RTI.
Yeah, so we're fortunate that we have recently partnered with RTI International around step down programs. We're one of 4 research sites that they are working with right now. And that's one of the things that they are helping us look at. They just got a large data dump from us, and they're looking at not to get too technical, but like a survival, where are people most likely to start failing? And do we want to change what some of those timeframes look like? So in other words, to Aubrey's point, are 60 and 90 the right number of days? Should it be more? Should it be less? The graph that she just showed you seems to signify that maybe the violations occur sooner than 60 days. The other things that we're looking at there are what information is most helpful to provide to judges to help them make decisions or to that's going to be more likely for them to order a time limited order, or if they're not seeing a time limited order and we're just giving them a request when somebody's not given that time limited order, which we can still do. What information are they going to see that's going to make them more likely to reduce or remove conditions of supervision? The other thing that we have been wanting to look at is we've got that 60 days and then they drop down to enhanced supervision, but then they just kind of stay on indefinitely. Is there a period after that they then drop off as well, just like the 90 days enhanced? So does it go 60 and then 90, or what does that look like? So right now they're working with us on data, they're meeting with focus groups and finding out kind of what our stakeholders and our practitioners like, don't like, what they want to change, what they think works. So that's been really helpful. And then we do continue to kind of look at data and kind of see, what is our population doing? What do they do after these things happen? What does it look different between new crime and FTA? All that kind of stuff. So that kind of concludes our presentation. I know we have a lot of questions to get to. I do have a slide with our contact information as well, but if you would also take down this QR code and provide some session feedback, we do really appreciate that at NAPSA. It helps us to continue to provide good content for the webinars and helps Aubrey and I know what we can do better next time we present something. So if you could take that down really quick, and then I think maybe Wendy might put it in the chat as well. Here is our contact slide. I will also ask her to put that, or contact our emails in the chat, and then we'll start getting to some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Aubrey, I think you might have answered Spike's question, but do you want to just go a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I would love to say that those numbers came from, data. It certainly came more from kind of that experience, of just working with cases over the years. Now I think we have some data that hopefully we can make that a little more, data driven. I think the next question, who provides funding for the electronic monitoring? So we are fortunate in Denver in that defendants are not charged for GPS monitoring or supervision at all. So the city actually pays for all of that monitoring. That has not always been the case. That definitely was an evolution over time, but the city, I think, understands the quandary of having pretrial defendants pay for GPS monitoring goes against, I think, what our agency, our stakeholders, and certainly the city thinks is appropriate. Lindsay, you want to talk about caseload ratios?
Yeah, so the next question, what is the caseload per pretrial staff ratio for EMP cases? That's a tough question. Several years ago, we did do like electronic monitoring only caseloads where those staff only supervised electronic monitoring caseloads, but now they are mixed caseloads. So any one officer may have between 20 and 70 electronic monitoring cases, which is mainly GPS, but could also consist of remote breath or transdermal devices as well. So that kind of widely varies. It's a tricky question. Let's see.
Looks like Greg's question, does your legal infrastructure allow your agency to modify the use of electronic monitoring independently, or do you require court modifications of the conditions of release? I think this is one of the great things about time limited supervision is we cannot change bond conditions once they are ordered by the court. However, the way we structure time limited supervision is it is ordered at the initial advisement. So the court is specifically ordering you are on GPS for 60 days. If you are compliant, you will be moved down to enhanced supervision. So it's technically not a change to the bond condition when we move that person from GPS to accused. So it does have to be ordered initially as part of the supervision conditions. Very different than someone being ordered to GPS monitoring and then we decide 60 days later that we think they should be removed. That we would have to go to the court for. The beauty of this is it's ordered at the initial advisement, which allows us the leeway to determine whether that person is compliant or not, and then move them down if appropriate.
Aubrey, there's a question kind of high up in the chat I happen to see. I'm going to pull really quick. Does the 60 or it's a good question. does the 90 or 60-day clock start over if a defendant is non-compliant, like they had a positive UA or a new offense, or does that violation make them no longer eligible for limited supervision and then they stay on for the remainder? So this is a tough one because it depends on what the judge does. So if it is an FTA, that kind of eliminates it. We don't even go back to the court for that because our thinking is that the court knows that they FTA'd. We don't have to notify the court, hey, this person FTA'd for court. They're like, yeah, we know, we were there. So if it's any other violation, we're going to be filing a report. We're basically kind of at that point telling the court, because they were non-compliant, they're no longer eligible for this time limited supervision. We're going to keep them on supervision. But if the judge disagrees with that, they may say, no, either they still should be removed after the 90 days, or no, we want it to start over as of today. So we do see that happen occasionally. The other thing that could happen is somebody like may go into custody for an unrelated probation violation. Say they decide to do a 10 days probation, they revoked it, did 10 days in jail. That's not going to stop them from their time limited. They just stop maybe at 50 days, they come out, and then they finish their 40 days. So we would still give them credit, just only for the time they were out on supervision. But yeah, the clock doesn't restart unless the court requests us to kind of do it that way.
I'll grab another one out of the Q&A. So this says, for those who are missing pretrial reporting but are reporting to court, you are allowed to remove them from pretrial without a bond modification. So yes, we are. The notice that goes to the court will have a statement on there that the defendant hasn't reported to pretrial, but we still consider that in most cases compliance. Again, that goes back to technical compliance versus are they compliant with public safety and appearance. Part of that is the theory. If they are doing the things we want them to do, going to court and not picking up a new case, maybe they don't need supervision. So that certainly goes on the notice to the court, but yes, we still remove them. And I don't think, Lindsay, correct me, I don't think that we see very often that the court says, no, don't remove them when they get those notices.
We have seen prosecution see that statement on the notice and they file something. That's only happened a few times, and then the court still usually removes it. So is the notification for removal process only in Denver? Is it statewide? So it's only in Denver. As Aubrey mentioned at the beginning, we are not statewide for pretrial. Unfortunately, it is jurisdiction by jurisdiction. To my knowledge, we're the only program currently doing any sort of step down. However, 2 of the RTI sites are in Colorado, and they are looking to implement potentially some sort of step down system. So we may have 2 other of our larger jurisdictions doing something similar. I don't know if it'll look like ours or not. And then we kind of already discussed implementation there. And then did we skip Marshall's question? It looks like we might have. Or maybe we answered it. So any data to back up the time or days on supervision. So that I think speaks to like the survival. We've looked at some initial data on kind of when people start to violate. We're doing more of that with RTI. So I think we kind of did talk about that. Oh, Aubrey, do you want to talk about why our FTA rate was so high for 90 days enhanced?
That is a phenomenal question. I certainly wish I had the golden answer to that. I will tell you generally, so our appearance rate in Denver overall for our entire population sits right around 67 to 72 over the last 5 or 6 years. And so most of that, or not most of it, we see a little bit more of that on our enhanced cases than our GPS cases. Our appearance rate with our GPS cases is generally better. So I don't know that necessarily it's a split between enhanced and GPS that is significant. But yes, we are continuing to work on our appearance rate. I also think you're looking at 90 days, which is giving them more time to FTA versus 60 days. So I think some of it is just the number of court hearings that that person has in 60 days versus 90 days. So that's in the number part, that's probably reflected.
I would also add that just in Denver, we've got a different population than I think you'll see in the rest of the state. We've got a lot of transient population. We've got a large drug using population. We have had in the past just more of the instability factors, I think. So a lot of mental health. So I think that contributes to our FTA rates, where if you look at some of the other cities, they may just have a different makeup of their population, and that may contribute. But yes, it continues to confound and frustrate us, and we do continue to work on how we can improve those. Open to it, yes.
Lindsay, this one is probably good for you. When moved from intensive to enhanced, how long on enhanced?
So currently, when somebody moved from intensive after the 60 days to enhanced, it's indefinite. Now, an officer could file a report and go back to court. We still have that option. It does involve, sitting in court, writing up the report, filing it with all the parties and all that kind of stuff. We still do that. It's just that more time consuming. And I think officers just don't tend to pay attention to those cases. I recently filed quite a few of those as we had been restricted in resources here, trying to get some cases off, and figured out firsthand myself why it can be a frustrating process. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why with RTI we've identified wanting to find a way to implement something that's more of a step, like a double step down instead of just the one time.
Lindsay, we'll give this one to you too.
Yeah.
GPS due to compliance, and you notify the victim. Have you encountered any issues with the victim not intervening?
We have probably not as often as you might think. I also think that there's some behind the scenes components here because it's not a requirement. We have something called the Victim Rights Act in Colorado, and there's certain parts or stages of a case where notification to a victim is required. This is not one of them because the initial order of bond didn't change. So there's not a requirement to notify victims. So I do think there may be victims that don't receive notification from their advocates because they're saying, oh, it's not required. So I think there may be some things going on behind the scenes. I do think some do engage and say that they're concerned. I also think when they're contacted, that may bring about actually like violations that have been occurring of the protection order that we didn't know about, that all of a sudden get reported to law enforcement and maybe trigger a new crime. And then we're looking at continuing them anyway. So I do think, yes, that we've had some things expressed. I was just in court on a case this week, and victim had reported concerns and the judge kept them on supervision. So you do see that sometimes, probably not as often as you would think, but I think that is due to some other factors, not necessarily just that many people are being notified and aren't responding to it, if that makes sense.
And we've got a couple requests for the presentation and some of the data slides, and we're happy to share any of that. So we'll take this information and make sure that that gets shared with the group. How often does the prosecution file a motion requesting to continue monitoring? That is something we haven't measured. So I think, to Lindsay's point, I think it's less frequent than you would think. However, that is definitely a measure kind of on that to-do list that we want to look at. Let's see. Does the EMP caseload only involve caseloads in the pretrial stage, or does pretrial also monitor violations of probation or parole cases? I'm going to take that one easy.
Yeah. So our pretrial program is very pretrial specific. We do have under our division, we have a very small post-conviction program that does monitor some in-home detention orders like house arrest, and a very small number of probation orders where we have just kind of an agreement with our probation department, but the pretrial officers and the pretrial programs here, we are only pretrial. We only focus on pretrial cases. We don't do probation or parole cases.
Do you have a sense of what the most common reasons the prosecution gives for why to not lower someone off of supervision?
Yes. So I would say we've already talked about one, which is victim preference or input. The other one would be just the nature of the charges or the nature of the case itself. I think those are the two biggest things. And it's almost always a victim related offense.
Can you share why you decided to start mixing the caseloads? So I'm assuming that's GPS and abuse.
Gosh, I don't, Aubrey, this was
Yeah.
probably more your decision than mine.
Yeah,
ours.
I think over the years we have done it many different ways. We have certainly had separate caseloads. We've had mixed caseloads. We've tried a variety of combinations. I think some of it is we do our own direct monitoring. We really have a very talented team, and they are very well versed in the electronic monitoring. And I think that what we found is, the needs of those two populations are still very much the same. I think officers like having both types of cases. It keeps everyone challenged. I think most officers, once they're trained and like GPS, want to have some of those cases. But I don't think there's a perfect recipe. I think we've done it both ways, and there's pros and cons to both.
And that was from Allison. She's in Colorado. You know how to get a hold of us if you want to talk through that more. Do you do true home detention where a defendant can't leave their home, or is it GPS only monitoring? So on our pretrial caseloads, we do have some movement restrictions that exists in the form of either a curfew, something that's called employment leave only, which means essentially they can only go to work and then go home, and other like essential medical legal appointments. And then we have something that we don't really consider a supervision level. It's more kind of our version of preventative detention, because we do not have that in our constitution in Colorado. So we have something called maximum home confinement, which we usually request the judge pair with a high cash only bond for our very severe public safety risk folks. And that is where they are truly confined to the home. On GPS, they really can't leave except for court and medical emergencies, and that's kind of it. So we do have, yes, a true in-home detention, just for those limited number of cases. We probably have less than 20 of those people out on supervision at any given time. Aubrey, I think the next two questions you can probably take.
Okay. What determines someone starting out on intensive supervision or enhanced? Does everyone start on intensive? So definitely, most defendants do not start on intensive. So truly about 70 to 70, almost 75% of the population starts on enhanced. We have risk assessment. We have a decision matrix that's part of that administrative order. That is what our investigation and release team use to at least give them a starting point for recommending supervision in the bond advisement report. So that is kind of where the initial recommendation comes from us, and the court obviously makes the order after the bond advisement hearing. We're fortunate we do have both prosecution and defense at those bond advisement hearings, so we have a very thorough first advisement process. But that is really what's determining is the risk assessment and the charge and that hearing outcome. Most defendants are ordered to enhance supervision to start. How long do cases generally take to reach disposition? Our average length of stay right now is about 150 days, keeping in mind that we have 3 different case types that have kind of 3 different paths through the system. But generally speaking, about 150 days is the average length of stay. think we got them all. I'm just looking more time at the chat. So certainly our contact information is available. Feel free to reach out if you have other questions, and we will share this presentation. Oh, it looks like another question just came through. Do you monitor dependents on TNP that live outside your local county or out of state? So definitely out of county. So we are a metro area, so we have dependents from quite frankly all over the state, but definitely within the metro area. So it's really where the wherever the person lives is where we will monitor them. Sometimes they do move or live out of state, and if the court allows them to be out of state, we will monitor them out of state also. Okay. I think, did we get all of the questions? You see any other?
Looks like there's one more that says, did you say it takes 250 days to disposition?
150 days is the average length of stay on supervision.
Great. And then there's just one comment there from Spike. Thank you, Spike, saying to both you, Aubrey and Lindsay, a great presentation, which I completely agree. Um, so, hold on, did I miss one? Oh no, that's Spike. Sorry, thought I missed one. Again, big thanks to Aubrey and Lindsay from Denver City and County Pretrial for doing such a wonderful job and really providing this riveting presentation and about an innovative program that I think there's reason that there's been so much positive feedback from this at the conference and after. So grateful for you both to have been here today. For those of you that are still here, if you see the last three pieces there in the chat, there's some great useful information there. There's Lindsay and Aubrey's contact information is there, their email addresses. There's also this survey link to provide feedback on this webinar, as well as any future webinars you would be interested in. And then also I put the registration link for the January webinar in the chat as well. So those three things. I did promise to give you just a little bit of a preview of the website. So give me 1 second here and I will flip over and share my screen. The features I'm going to show you now, some of them existed, but some of them did not in our prior website. So I hope that you've had a chance to go to our website, www.napsa.org. This just went live on Monday officially, and hopefully you guys received an email about it. But two places that I wanted to point out are under the resources section. We have previously released webinars. So in the next couple of business days, as soon as I can get it up there, basically, there will be a place right here where this presentation video will live, and as well, Aubrey and Lindsay have graciously said that they would share their slides, and so we'll get those slides connected here in this spot. So again, under resources and previously released webinars is where you can find that. The other place that I wanted to show you is under training and events. We have upcoming webinars and calendar of events. So if you scroll down here, we are still building just a bit of this part of the website. So in the future, here in this section where it says NAPSA webinars, before we get to the calendar of events, I am hopeful to have direct links right here where you will be able to see our webinars so that you can click straight from our website to register. But a little bit of a hidden spot and a feature that we have never had until Monday is a calendar of events. So you can see that today's webinar is here and you could register right here from the calendar. And we are also, you'll see the January event, January 21st, the HARP presentation, as well as February 4th, the presentation on coaching model versus the referee model. Those links are right there so you can register from our website. You'll also see, and this is something that we're going to work with our partners on, that we are going to have partner events as well. So one of the conferences that many of the folks in the Southwest attend is the TAPS conference in Texas. That one's in in March. We have a link here. There's also one coming in April, the IPCSA, the Illinois Probation and Court Services Association. That's likely going to be expanded to become a regional training for pretrial. So things like that, things like partner events with APPR, we are really hopeful to try to get a nice operating calendar of events that will help all pretrial practitioners and maybe even some more general community corrections folks. So take a look at our website. We're really excited about it. Always excited to accept feedback as well if you see something that's missing or not working, or if you just have feedback in general. But thank you so much for all of you being here with us today, and for spending a little bit of your December with us. I know this is always a busy month, year end, as well as kind of I used to spend the time kind of cleaning up my desk and everything in preparation for the new year. And then, of course, there's so many great holidays coming up for everyone. So thank you for spending your time with us. Everyone, take care and happy holidays.